They thought my silence was a sign of defeat. They thought I would let my father give my brother my hard-earned office without a fight. They were wrong. 5 weeks after I joined the military, the first crack in their perfect world appeared. The thing about military training is that it teaches you patience in a way civilian life never could. Not the kind of patience where you grit your teeth and endure. The strategic kind. The kind where you learn that timing matters more than force. I'd been gone 5 weeks when the first real crack appeared. Mom called on a Thursday evening. I was in my bunk, polishing boots, when my phone lit up. I let it ring twice before answering. Old habits die hard, but new ones were taking root. "Claire," she said. Her voice had that thin quality it got when she was trying not to sound desperate. "I need to ask you something." I set down the boot polish. "Go ahead." The insurance payment bounced. "Your father thought it went through, but apparently the account." She trailed off. "We need $800 by Monday or we lose coverage on both cars." I closed my eyes. Pictured the spreadsheet I'd made 6 months ago. The one that tracked every expense I'd quietly absorbed. Insurance had been on that list for 2 years. "That's difficult," I said evenly. Silence stretched between us. "Claire, I know things have been tense, but this is important. We can't drive without insurance." "I understand," I replied. "Have you considered a payment plan with the company?" She stumbled over the words. "I didn't know that was an option. Most companies offer them. There's usually a phone number on the notice." Another pause. This one felt different. Heavier. "You're really not going to help?" It wasn't a question. It was an observation, tinged with something that might have been the beginning of understanding. "I'm helping right now," I said quietly. "I'm telling you what your options are. That's different from solving it for you." She hung up without saying goodbye. I went back to my boots. My hands were steady. That surprised me more than anything else. The thing about being someone's safety net is that they build their entire life assuming you'll always be there to catch them. They take risks they can't afford. They make promises they can't keep. They operate on borrowed security without realizing the loan has terms. When you remove yourself, the whole structure doesn't collapse immediately. It sways first, tests its own weight, discovers which foundations were real and which were just you, holding things up with sheer will. Ryan's streaming career lasted exactly 6 weeks after I left. I found out through a text from Dad. Short, clipped, missing his usual attempts at casual authority. Ryan's channel got demonetized. Something about reused content. He's pretty upset. I read it 3 times, looking for the hidden request. The subtle expectation that I'd call, comfort, fix. It wasn't there. Or maybe it was, buried so deep he didn't even know he was asking. I replied, "That's tough. I hope he figures it out." No offer to help with appeals. No research into YouTube policies. No late-night crisis management session where I untangled someone else's mess while my own needs waited patiently in the corner. Just acknowledgement and boundary. 3 days later, Mom called again. "Ryan got a job," she said. "Full-time. Warehouse work, like you suggested." I heard something in her voice I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or surprise. Like she'd forgotten her son was capable of surviving without constant intervention. "That's good," I said. "He starts at 5 in the morning. He's adjusting." I almost smiled. "That'll get easier." "Will it?" She sounded genuinely uncertain. "If he keeps showing up," I said. "Yes." We talked for 20 minutes. Not about problems or solutions. About the weather. About a recipe she'd tried. About nothing urgent or critical or requiring my intervention. When we hung up, I realized I couldn't remember the last time we'd done that. 2 months in, I received an email from Dad. Subject line, Family Budget Review. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Inside was a spreadsheet. Clumsy, with merged cells in weird places and formulas that probably didn't work right, but a spreadsheet nonetheless. Categories labeled. Amounts listed. A column marked Claire's previous contribution, highlighted in yellow. At the bottom, a note in the comments section. "We didn't realize how much you were covering. We're working on redistributing this. Wanted you to see the numbers." I downloaded the file and opened it properly. Formatted it. Fixed the formulas. Not because they asked, but because I needed to see it clearly. The total came to $14,600. $14,600 over the past 18 months. Repairs, utilities, subscriptions, emergency expenses, things they'd categorized as temporary help that had somehow become permanent infrastructure. I sat with that number for a long time. Not with anger. Anger would have meant I was still fighting their version of reality. This was something colder and clearer. Evidence. Proof that I hadn't imagined my own erasure. I replied to the email. Received. Thank you for putting this together. I'd like to discuss repayment terms when I'm home next month. His response came within an hour. We can do that. We should have done it sooner. No excuses. No minimizing. Just acknowledgement. It wasn't enough to undo years of imbalance. But it was the first real weight on the other side of the scale. The call I'd been half expecting came 3 months after I left. Grandma Helen had passed away quietly in her sleep. 92 years old, sharp until the very end, and the only person in the family who'd ever looked at me like she saw past the utility to the person underneath. Dad's voice was steady when he told me, but I could hear the calculation already forming beneath the grief. The will reading is next Tuesday, he said. You should be there. I'll request leave, I replied. She left something for everyone. Divided it fairly, according to the lawyer. Fairly. That word did a lot of work in our family. Usually it meant equal amounts while ignoring unequal circumstances. I flew in on Monday night. The house felt different again. Smaller. Not because I'd grown, but because I'd stopped bending myself to fit its dimensions. Ryan was in the living room when I arrived. He looked up from his phone, started to say something, then stopped. We nodded at each other. Adults sharing space, not siblings sharing history. Mom hugged me. Longer than necessary. She smelled like the lavender soap she'd used my whole life, and for a moment I was 12 again, small enough to believe love and sacrifice were the same thing. How are you holding up? I asked. It hasn't really hit yet, she said. Mom was. She was constant, you know? I knew. The will reading happened in a lawyer's office that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The kind of space where serious things got decided by people in suits who'd never met the dead person they were dividing up. Grandma Helen had been thorough. Specific. Almost surgical in her distributions. To Mom, her jewelry. The pieces she'd worn to church every Sunday, the pearls she'd gotten on her 50th anniversary. To Dad, her collection of first edition books. He'd spent summers as a kid reading them in her sunroom. To Ryan, her grandfather clock. The one that had chimed in the background of every family gathering, steady and unignorable. And to me. The lawyer paused before reading my portion. Adjusted his glasses in that way people do when they're about to deliver news they think might cause a reaction. To my granddaughter Claire, who has carried more than her share without complaint, I leave the proceeds from the sale of my home at 428 Maple Street, Riverside, along with the contents of my investment account at First National Bank, totaling approximately $340,000. Use this to build something that's entirely yours. You've earned it. The room went very quiet. I felt everyone's eyes on me. Felt the weight of that number settling into the space like a boulder dropped into still water. Mom's hand went to her mouth. Dad's face did something complicated. Surprise, recalculation, something that might have been shame. Ryan just stared. $340,000, Dad repeated, like saying it out loud might change the amount. The lawyer nodded. The property sold last month. The funds are currently held in escrow pending distribution. Ms. Chin, you'll need to provide banking information for the transfer. I found my voice. It came out steadier than I expected. When do you need that by? End of the week would be ideal. I nodded. Professional. Calm. Like people told me I'd inherited life-changing money every day. We signed papers. Shook hands. Filed out into the parking lot where the late afternoon sun turned everything gold and unreal. Dad pulled me aside before I could reach my car. Claire. He said my name like he was testing its weight. That's a significant amount. Yes. Grandma Helen must have really believed in you. I met his eyes. Saw him working through scenarios. Possibilities. The old patterns trying to reassert themselves. She did, I said quietly. She told me once that she recognized the signs. That she'd been the reliable one in her family too. He absorbed that. You'll be smart with it. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I will. He hesitated, and I could see the request forming. The old reflex. The assumption that my resources were family resources, just redistributed. I spoke before he could. I'm going to use it exactly how she wanted. To build something that's entirely mine. The words hung between us. Clear. Unmistakable. He nodded slowly. Right. Of course. The money hit my account on a Friday. I logged into my banking app 3 times that day just to look at the number. Not because I didn't believe it was real, but because I needed to practice the feeling of having something this substantial that no one could borrow, redistribute, or categorize as a family asset. $340,000. More than I'd made in my entire working life. More than I'd saved by being careful and strategic and perpetually second to everyone else's needs. Enough to change everything. I didn't tell anyone the exact amount. When Mom asked, I said enough to be comfortable. When Ryan texted, "So you're rich now?" I replied, "I'm secure." Security and wealth weren't the same thing. Security meant options. Wealth meant expectations. I met with a financial advisor the following week. A woman named Patricia who looked at my situation with a kind of clear-eyed assessment that reminded me of Grandma Helen. "What are your goals?" she asked. I'd been thinking about that question since the lawyer's office. I want to buy property. Nothing extravagant. Something I own outright. I want to finish my degree without debt. I want to build an emergency fund that actually covers emergencies. And I want to invest the rest so I'm never dependent on anyone again. She smiled. Not patronizing. Approving. Those are excellent goals. Very achievable with this amount. We spent 2 hours mapping it out. Numbers, timelines, risk assessments. She explained things I'd never had the luxury of learning because I'd been too busy keeping other people's financial ships from sinking. By the end of the meeting, I had a plan. $100,000 for a small house. Outskirts of town, near the base, nothing fancy but mine. $40,000 for finishing my computer science degree. Online programs, flexible schedule, no student loans. $50,000 emergency fund. 6 months of expenses untouchable. $150,000 invested. Diversified, balanced, designed for long-term growth. The numbers added up to freedom. I found the property 3 weeks later. It was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. The yard was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and the porch had a sag that would need addressing. But it was structurally sound. Good bones, the inspector said. The kind of place that rewarded effort. I made an offer that afternoon. Cash. No contingencies. The seller accepted within an hour. Standing in the empty living room on closing day, I felt something shift in my chest. Not joy exactly. Something quieter and more permanent. Ownership. Not just of the house, but of my own trajectory. My own story. My own definition of what success looked like. I took a photo of the keys in my hand and texted it to Mom with one word, mine. She called immediately. "You bought a house?" I did. "Claire, that's wonderful." She sounded genuinely happy. Also surprised. Like she'd forgotten I was capable of making decisions this substantial without consulting the family council first. "Can we see it?" she asked. "Once I get it fixed up," I said. "It needs work. Your father could help with that." I paused. Old offer, new context. "I'm hiring professionals," I said gently. "But thank you." Understanding settled into the silence. "Of course," she said. "It's your house." "Yes," I replied. "It is." I spent the next 2 months learning how to be a homeowner. Not by doing everything myself. That was the old pattern, the old proof of worth. Instead, I hired people. A contractor for the porch. A painter for the exterior. A landscaper for the yard. I paid fair wages. Got multiple quotes. Verified licenses and insurance. Did everything by the book because this wasn't about proving I could fix things myself. It was about building something sustainable. The contractor, a man named Marcus with graying temples and steady hands, seemed surprised by my approach. "Most first-time homeowners try to do everything themselves," he said while measuring the porch. "I know my limits," I replied. He nodded approvingly. "That's rare." I spent weekends at the house, not working but planning. Choosing paint colors. Measuring for furniture. Imagining what the space would feel like when it was finished. Ryan texted me halfway through the renovation. "Heard you got a place." "That's cool." "Thanks," I replied. "Must be nice having that inheritance money." I stared at the message. Felt the familiar pull toward justification, explanation, defense. Instead, I wrote, "Grandma Helen left it to me for a reason." His response took 5 minutes. "Yeah, I guess she did." No follow-up. No request. Just acknowledgement. Progress came in strange forms. The house was finished in early October. Fresh paint, sturdy porch, yard trimmed and manageable. Inside, I'd kept things simple. Furniture that fit the space. Minimal decoration. Everything functional and intentional. It looked like a starter home. It felt like a fortress. I invited my parents and Ryan over for dinner. Not a grand gesture, just a quiet acknowledgement that we were still family, just on different terms now. They arrived together. Dad carrying wine, Mom with a houseplant, Ryan empty-handed but present. I gave them the tour. Kitchen, living room, bedrooms, bathroom. They made appropriate sounds. Admired the workmanship. Commented on the light. But what I noticed most was what they didn't do. They didn't suggest changes. Didn't offer to fix the cabinet door that stuck slightly. Didn't point out where I could optimize or improve. They treated it like my space. Not a project. Not an opportunity to contribute their expertise. Just mine. We ate lasagna at my small table. Talked about surface things. Mom's book club, Dad's work, Ryan's promotion to shift supervisor. Halfway through dessert, Dad set down his fork. "This is a good place, Claire. You should be proud." "I am," I said. He nodded. Picked up his fork again. That was all. But later, as they were leaving, Mom pulled me aside. "Your grandmother would have loved this," she said softly. "I think so too." She squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner. How much you were doing. How much you needed space." I squeezed back. "We're seeing it now." "Yes," she said. "We are." The monthly payments started in November. $500. Every month. Automatically transferred from Dad's account to mine. He'd calculated it carefully. Divided my 18-month contribution by 36 months. Added a small amount for interest. Set up the transfer without fanfare. The first payment came with a text, first of many. No excuses this time. I stared at the notification for a long time. Not because I needed the money. With the inheritance properly invested, my finances were stable. But because of what it represented. Accountability. Follow-through. The acknowledgement that debt existed even within families. I replied, "Received. Thank you." The second payment came exactly 1 month later. Then the third. No reminders needed. No excuses offered. By the fourth payment, I stopped checking for it. It arrived like clockwork, steady and unremarkable. That steadiness mattered more than the amount. I finished my degree in 18 months. Online courses, night classes, weekends spent writing code and debugging programs. The GI Bill covered most of it, but I paid the difference out of my education fund without hesitation. The graduation ceremony was small. No cap and gown, just a certificate mailed to my house and an email confirming my completion. I framed it anyway. Hung it in my home office, next to my discharge papers and a photo of Grandma Helen. Mom called when she heard. "You graduated?" "Last week." "Claire, that's incredible. Why didn't you tell us?" "It wasn't a big production," I said. "Just finished the last requirement." "Still, we would have celebrated." "We can celebrate at Christmas," I offered. "Yes," she said. "Yes, we will." They came to my house for Christmas. My idea, my space, my terms. I cooked. Turkey, stuffing, the whole traditional spread. Not to prove anything, but because I wanted to. Because cooking in my own kitchen for people I chose to invite felt different than obligation disguised as love. Ryan brought his girlfriend. A quiet woman named Sam who worked in logistics and had kind eyes. She complimented my house genuinely, without the performative enthusiasm people sometimes use with new homeowners. We exchanged gifts. Small things, thoughtful rather than expensive. Dad gave me a toolkit. Professional grade, organized in a rolling case. "For the house," he said. "So you don't have to borrow." Mom gave me a cookbook. Handwritten recipes from Grandma Helen that she'd compiled and printed. "I thought you'd want these." Ryan gave me a gift card to a home improvement store. "Sam helped me pick it," he admitted. "I'm not good at this stuff yet." "Yet implies you're learning," I said. He shrugged. "Trying to." I gave them practical things. A subscription to a meal planning service for Mom, who'd mentioned wanting to cook more. A quality pen set for Dad, whose handwriting I'd always admired. A book on management for Ryan, who was struggling with his new responsibilities. They weren't grand gestures. But they were seen. Acknowledged. Appreciated. After dinner, we sat in my living room. Coffee and cookies. No television, just conversation. Dad cleared his throat. I want to say something. He looked at me directly. I've been thinking about these past months. About how things were. How we operated. Everyone went quiet. We took advantage, he continued. Not intentionally, maybe. But impact matters more than intent. You taught me that. Mom nodded. We did. And I'm sorry. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, me too. I was really wrapped up in my own stuff. Didn't think about what you were carrying. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Forgiveness implied a debt that needed clearing. This was something else. Recognition. The acknowledgement that we'd all been living in patterns we inherited and perpetuated without examination. Thank you, I said. All of you. Are we? Mom hesitated. Are we good? I considered the question. Really considered it. We're different, I said finally. Better different. We're learning how to be family without using each other. That takes time. Dad nodded slowly. But we're trying. Yes, I agreed. We are. 6 months later, I got promoted. Senior systems analyst. Better pay, better benefits, more responsibility. The kind of position I'd been quietly working toward while everyone else focused on more visible ambitions. My supervisor called me into her office to tell me personally. You've earned this, she said. Your work is exceptional. Consistent. Reliable. I'd heard those words before. Reliable. Consistent. In my family, they'd been synonyms for expendable. Here, they meant valued. Thank you, I said. You start next month. Take some time to transition your current projects. I celebrated alone that night. Pizza, ice cream, a movie I'd been wanting to see. Simple pleasures in my own space, answerable to no one. I texted my family the news. Mom, so proud of you. Dad, well deserved. Congratulations. Ryan, that's awesome. Does it come with a raise? I smiled at his directness. Yes, a significant one. His response, nice. You earned it. No requests. No hints. No assumption that my success created opportunity for them. Just acknowledgement. Ryan and Sam got engaged in spring. He called to tell me, voice bright with nervousness and excitement. We're thinking small, he said. Just family and close friends. Would you? I'd like you to be there. Obviously. Obviously, I echoed, amused. And actually. He paused. Would you do a reading? During the ceremony? Sam suggested it. Said you'd be perfect. Something warm expanded in my chest. I'd be honored. The wedding was in June. Outdoor venue, simple decorations, exactly what they'd said it would be. I wore a blue dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not borrowed, not repurposed. Mine. The reading was from a poem about partnership. About two people choosing each other daily, building something together through intention rather than obligation. My voice stayed steady throughout. When I finished and returned to my seat, Mom squeezed my hand. At the reception, Ryan found me during a quiet moment. Thank you for the reading, he said. And for, everything else. Everything else? He looked at his shoes. Then back at me. For not giving up on us. On me. You could have. Would have been fair if you did. I studied his face. Saw someone who'd grown up in the past year and a half. Not completely, not perfectly, but visibly. You're my brother, I said. That doesn't mean I have to fix your life. But it also doesn't mean I stop caring. He nodded. I'm trying to be better. To be someone Sam can actually count on. Someone who pulls their weight. I can see that, I said. It shows. He smiled. Genuine, unguarded. Yeah. I bought a second property in August. Not for myself. As an investment. A duplex near the university, both units rentable, property management company already lined up. Patricia, my financial advisor, had suggested it months earlier. You have the capital. The market is favorable. It's a smart long-term move. I'd resisted initially. Owning one home had felt revolutionary enough. But the numbers made sense. And more than that, the principle made sense. Building wealth wasn't about hoarding. It was about creating stability. About ensuring I'd never be in a position where I needed to compromise my boundaries for survival. The duplex cash flowed from day one. Modest profits, but steady. The property management company handled everything. I just watched the reports come in monthly, watched my investment grow. Independence compounded. We rotated holidays now. Last year at my place. This year at Mom and Dad's. Next year, Ryan and Sam's new apartment. It wasn't a rule. Just a natural evolution. Everyone hosting, everyone contributing, everyone sharing the load. I arrived at my parents' house with pies I'd made the night before. Pumpkin and apple from Grandma Helen's recipes. The house looked different. Cleaner, more organized. The clutter that used to accumulate in corners had been dealt with. The repairs that used to wait for me had been handled by Dad and Ryan, not perfectly, but adequately. The back room, my old office, was now a proper guest room. Neutral paint, comfortable furniture, no trace of Ryan's streaming setup. We redid it last month, Mom said when she caught me looking. Thought it should be welcoming. For when you visit. It looks good, I said. Dinner was a collective effort. Dad carved the turkey. Ryan mashed potatoes. Sam set the table. Mom coordinated, but didn't do everything herself. I contributed my pies and helped with cleanup. During dessert, Dad raised his glass. To family, he said. To learning. To second chances. We clinked glasses. Simple words, heavy meaning. Later, after Sam and Ryan left, I sat with my parents in the living room. The last payment clears next month, Dad said quietly. We'll be settled up. I know, I said. Thank you for following through. It was the least we could do. Literally. He smiled ruefully. I wish I'd understood sooner. How much you were carrying. How unfair we were being. Mom nodded. We kept thinking of you as so capable. So strong. We didn't realize we were treating your strength like a resource instead of a gift. I didn't realize it either, I admitted. Not fully. Not until I had distance. Are you glad you left? Mom asked. Joined the military, moved out, all of it? I considered the question carefully. I'm glad I learned I could, I said. That I was capable of building a life that didn't require constantly sacrificing myself. The military was the path I chose. But the leaving itself? Yes. I'm glad. Dad nodded slowly. You taught us something important. About boundaries. About respect. About ourselves, really, Mom added. About what we were asking without realizing. We sat in comfortable silence. The kind that used to be filled with tension and unspoken requests. Now it was just quiet. And that was enough. On the second anniversary of my enlistment, I found a letter in my mailbox. Hand-addressed. Grandma Helen's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. My dear Claire, if you're reading this, 2 years have passed since you took the hardest step. I'm writing this now while I'm still here, but asking my lawyer to hold it until the time is right. I saw you. I saw all of it. The fixing, the giving, the quiet erasure of yourself in service of people who loved you but didn't know how to honor you. I know because I was you. 50 years ago, in a different house, with different people, but the same pattern. The money I left you wasn't about the amount. It was about giving you what I never had, the resources to choose yourself without apology. You deserved better than being the foundation everyone else built on without acknowledgement. You deserve to be seen. I hope these 2 years have taught you what they taught me. That leaving isn't betrayal. That boundaries aren't cruelty. That loving people sometimes means letting them learn to stand without you propping them up. Build your life. Build it exactly how you want. Don't shrink to fit spaces too small for who you are. You've always been enough. You've always been extraordinary. Not because of what you did for them, but because of who you are. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I believe in who you're becoming. Always, Grandma Helen. I read it 3 times. Then a 4th. Then I cried. Not sad tears. Grateful ones. She'd seen me. Really seen me. And she'd given me permission to see myself the same way. I'm sitting in my home office. The second bedroom of the house on Porter Street, now fully mine. Desk positioned to catch the morning light, bookshelves lined with texts I've actually read, diploma hanging where I can see it every day. My life looks different than I imagined at 26. I'm 29 now. Senior systems analyst. Property owner. Degree holder. Investor. But the real differences are harder to measure. I talk to my parents weekly. Real conversations, not crisis management. They ask about my life. I ask about theirs. We share updates, offer support, maintain connection without consumption. Ryan and Sam are expecting their first child. He calls for advice sometimes. Not to fix his problems, but to discuss them. To process. To learn. Dad finished paying me back last year. Insisted on taking me to dinner to mark the final payment. Formal, almost ceremonial. His way of closing a chapter. Mom sends recipes. Checks in about my garden. Remembers my birthday without prompting. We're not perfect. We still have moments of friction, old patterns trying to resurface. But we catch them now. Name them. Work through them like adults instead of repeating scripts written in childhood. The duplex is doing well. Property value has increased. My investment portfolio is growing steadily. I'm considering a third property next year. But the real wealth isn't in the accounts or the equity. It's in the mornings I wake up without dread. The evenings I spend doing things I chose. The relationships I maintain because I want to, not because I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't. I think about Grandma Helen often. Wonder if she knew how profoundly her gift would change not just my circumstances, but my entire understanding of what I deserved. The money mattered. Of course it did. It created options, built security, provided foundation. But the real gift was the permission. To choose myself. To build boundaries. To understand that love doesn't require martyrdom. Sometimes I get emails from the military. Updates, opportunities, connections. I read them with interest, but no longing. That chapter served its purpose. It taught me structure, discipline, the value of clear expectations. But this chapter? This is the one I'm writing for myself. I'm not the person I was at 26. That Claire fixed everything, anticipated every need, disappeared herself in service of others. This Claire fixes what's hers to fix. Anticipates her own needs first. Shows up fully because she's not depleted. The difference is subtle but absolute. I still help my family. But I help from abundance, not obligation. I contribute because I choose to, not because the entire structure will collapse without me. And they've learned to stand. Not perfectly. Not without stumbling. But they're standing. Dad handles his own repairs now. Calls professionals when he's out of his depth. No longer assumes my time is infinitely available. Mom manages her own schedule. Sets boundaries with her church commitments. No longer uses guilt as a request mechanism. Ryan is learning to be a father the way I learned to be myself, one boundary at a time, one conscious choice after another. We're all still learning. But we're learning together as equals rather than in our old configuration of support structure and supported. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself in the early chapters, if you're the one who fixes, who gives, who quietly holds everything together while slowly disappearing, I want you to know, your worth isn't measured by your usefulness. You're allowed to stop, to rest, to build something for yourself that no one else gets to borrow or repurpose or claim as communal property. You're allowed to love people from a distance that protects you. You're allowed to let them struggle with problems you could solve but shouldn't have to. You're allowed to be more than infrastructure. It will feel selfish at first. The voices, internal and external, will tell you you're abandoning people who need you. But need and deserve are different things. And you deserve to be more than someone's solution. The kindest thing I ever did for my family was stop saving them from themselves. The kindest thing I ever did for myself was learn that lesson before I disappeared completely. 3 years ago, I was standing at a dinner table, listening to my father casually redistribute my workspace like it was a spare room instead of the foundation of my entire existence. Today, I'm sitting in my own house, in my own office, living a life I built with intention instead of inheriting by default. The path between those two moments wasn't straight. It wasn't easy. But it was worth every difficult conversation, every boundary defended, every moment of choosing myself when every instinct screamed to sacrifice instead. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's the cliché version. Here's the truth. You shouldn't have to pour until you're empty just to prove you're valuable. You're valuable because you exist, not because of what you provide. Learn that lesson. However you need to learn it. Then build something beautiful with the space it creates. I did. And 3 years later, I'm still building.